I spent my whole life giving love, time, money, and every piece of myself until one night over a table filled with food I had cooked, I heard words that shattered me in a way I can never forget. The dining room glowed with warm light, the clink of crystal glasses blending with soft jazz music. The roast chicken I had seasoned that morning filled the air with its slow-cooked richness. I had run errands all day to make sure everything was perfect, not even for myself, but because my son's wife Olivia had once again forgotten to tell me her parents were coming. She wanted the house spotless, the table full, the illusion flawless. I should have excused myself that evening. I should have recognized the way her mother's eyes slid over me, half curious, half condescending, like she was trying to figure out whether I belonged there. And then it happened. Her mother tilted her head and asked casually, "And you are?" Olivia didn't miss a beat. She let out a little laugh like it was the most amusing joke in the world. "Oh, that's Margaret," she said brightly, "our unofficial maid. Keeps the house running." The room burst into laughter, laughter that cut through me like glass. Even my son Ethan chuckled, his face turned away so he didn't have to see mine. I stood there holding an empty wine bottle I had just brought up from the basement, smiling politely, as though I didn't feel the floor disappear beneath my feet. My heart crumbled piece by piece, yet I excused myself quietly, placed the bottle on the counter, and walked to my bedroom. Behind me, their laughter echoed careless, merciless. Not one of them, not even my son, stood up to say, "That's my mother." That night, I sat on the edge of my bed, staring at the door I had painted myself years ago when we first moved in. My mind replayed the day I signed the mortgage papers, my name, my credit, my down payment. Ethan had just graduated, Olivia wasn't even in the picture. They had nothing. I had given them everything. And now in this house I had built, I was the maid. The next morning, I moved through routine as if nothing had changed. I brewed coffee, fed the cat Olivia pretended to like, and waited. When she came down in her yoga outfit, too busy scrolling on her phone to greet me, I stood still holding all the keys in my hand. The front door, the garage, the mailbox. "What's this?" she asked, furrowing her manicured brow. I smiled and said calmly, "Good luck paying the mortgage now." Her face froze in confusion, but I didn't stay to explain. I walked past the photos I had framed, the furniture I had chosen, the walls I had painted. I didn't take anything but my purse and the coat I had worn when I brought Ethan home from the hospital. He called after me barefoot in the driveway, his voice panicked. But I kept walking, closing the car door gently, not with anger, not with grief, but with clarity. Clarity is terrifying because it doesn't scream, it simply knows. And for the first time in my life, I knew I was done. That night I settled into a tiny apartment my great-aunt Ruth had left me. The silence there was suffocating, echoing against old wallpaper and groaning floorboards. It smelled of dust and time. I stood in the middle of that kitchen, unsure if I should cry or laugh. I did neither. In the days that followed, I moved like a ghost. I slept on the couch because the bed frame was broken, ate peanut butter sandwiches and microwaved soup, and waited for my son to call. But he didn't. Not a text. Not an email. Nothing. I thought of everything I had sacrificed, working nights, cleaning motel rooms, stocking groceries at dawn, pouring every ounce of energy into giving Ethan a future. I had bought the house with my parents' insurance money so he would never worry about rent. And somehow, in Olivia's version of the world, I had become the help. One night, unable to sleep, I dug through the storage closet in that apartment looking for a light bulb. I found a rusted trunk Aunt Ruth used to keep beneath her sewing machine. When I pried it open, I expected buttons, scraps, old fabric. Instead, I found envelopes, dozens of them. One in particular stopped my breath, addressed to me in Ruth's familiar handwriting, dated decades ago. My heart pounded as I unfolded the pages. Inside were hospital forms, yellowed notes, and a single photograph of a newborn baby wrapped in a blanket. Not Ethan. The name beneath it read Michael Jameson. The letter explained everything. Ruth had been a nurse the night I gave birth. She wrote of confusion in the nursery, a last-minute room switch tags that didn't match. By the time she tried to raise the issue, the babies had already been sent home. Years later, Ruth discovered a quiet settlement from the hospital to another family. And that's when she knew Ethan wasn't my biological son. I sat frozen, staring at the name Michael Jameson, refusing to believe yet unable to deny the evidence. If Ethan wasn't mine, then who was he? And who was I to him? For years I had felt like a stranger in my own home, unloved, dismissed, invisible. Maybe it hadn't been in my head. Maybe the coldness was real. And then, strangest of all, I didn't feel rage. I didn't feel grief. I felt free. The letter from Ruth lay heavy in my lap, trembling in my hands, as though it carried the weight of my entire life. I read it again and again, tracing the faded ink, trying to convince myself I had misunderstood. But the words were clear. The evidence undeniable: Ethan was not my biological son. For decades I had clung to a bond that only I seemed to honor, giving and giving, bleeding myself dry, only to be laughed at in my own home and called a maid. Perhaps this explained the emptiness I had always felt when I looked into his eyes. Perhaps, in some cruel twist of fate, he had always sensed it too. The photograph in the envelope showed a baby with dark hair and delicate fingers curled into a fist. A stranger's baby, my baby. Somewhere out there, a boy named Michael Jameson had grown up in another family, perhaps surrounded by a love I thought I was giving to my own son. My chest ached with the thought. Did he laugh like me? Did he hum when he cooked the way I did while stirring a pot on the stove? Was there someone out there who carried pieces of me, never knowing why they felt misplaced? For days I could do nothing but wander around that little apartment, clutching the photo as though it might answer me back. I couldn't call Ethan. I couldn't face him. What would I even say? You're not mine. He had already treated me like less than nothing. And if he knew, if he suspected, maybe it would give him the very excuse he craved to cut me out completely. No. This was a truth I had to carry alone, at least for now. But fate has a way of refusing silence. A week later, Olivia appeared at my door. She looked out of place in that shabby hallway, her designer coat brushing against peeling paint, her perfume choking the stale air. "We can't afford the payments," she blurted, before I could even ask why she was there. "Ethan thought you'd come back by now. You can't just abandon us like this." Her audacity nearly made me laugh. Abandon them. The house was mine. The mortgage mine. The life built by my hands. Yet she stood there accusing me as though I had betrayed them. I stared at her, wondering how many layers of entitlement she could wear without collapsing under their weight. "Good luck with the mortgage," I said, again my voice colder this time, and shut the door before she could plead further. That night I sat with Ruth's letter under the yellow glow of a single lamp and made a decision. I would find Michael. I had lived too long in shadows, too long in a home where I was invisible, unloved, erased. I wanted to see just once the child who was truly mine, not to reclaim him, not to demand a place in his life, but to know. To know whether blood mattered more than the years I had spent breaking myself for someone who could never see me. Hiring a private investigator was easier than I expected. Within 2 weeks, I had an address, a photo, a name carved in black ink across manila folders. Michael Jameson was 32, an architect, living in another city, with eyes that looked like mine staring back from the glossy image. My knees gave out when I saw it. I pressed the picture to my chest, tears spilling unchecked. He was alive. He was thriving, and he had no idea who I was. The first time I saw him in person, I didn't approach. I stood across the street watching as he carried groceries up the steps to a brick townhouse, pausing to hold the door for an elderly neighbor. The kindness in his small gesture cracked me open. This was my son. This was the boy I should have raised, the man I should have known. But my heart broke anew when a young woman emerged from the doorway holding a toddler on her hip. Michael leaned down, kissed the child's forehead, and the little girl giggled. A family. He already had a family, a life I would never be part of. For the first time in years, I let myself sob openly on that sidewalk, clutching the lamppost as though it could keep me upright. I returned to my empty apartment that night and thought of Ethan. He had not called not once. Perhaps he never would. And perhaps I finally understood why. Blood may not dictate love, but it explains silence. It explains distance. He had never felt me as his own, and maybe he was right. Maybe I had been trying to mother a stranger, forcing a bond that was never meant to be. And yet deep down I still loved him, even now, even after Olivia's cruel words, even after his laughter cut me apart. Love is stubborn like that. It clings to scars, refuses to die even when it should. But love does not mean servitude. Love does not mean humiliation. And I had given my last. The next morning I drafted a letter to Ethan. I told him the truth, not about Ruth's revelation, not about Michael, but about me. About the pain I carried, about the sacrifices I made, about how it felt to be erased at my own table. I didn't accuse, didn't condemn. I simply told him what it was like to be his mother, and how it broke me. I left the letter unsigned on the table, unsure if I would ever send it. The letter sat on my kitchen table for days, taunting me with its silence. Every morning I'd pass by it with my coffee, brushing my fingers over the envelope, but never sealing it, never stamping it. I kept asking myself, what was I hoping for? That Ethan would read it and finally see me, that he'd come running back with regret in his eyes, or was I simply craving closure from a bond that had always been one-sided? The truth was, I didn't know. One evening, restless and unable to face the four walls of my apartment, I decided to take a walk. The city was alive with noise horns, blaring footsteps, echoing laughter spilling out from restaurants. All around me, people carried on with their lives while mine felt paused, fractured by betrayal. I stopped at a park bench and watched a group of children chase each other across the grass. Their laughter was bright, unburdened, and for a fleeting moment I imagined Michael there, small and breathless, running toward me with outstretched arms. But when I blinked, it was gone. Back at home, the phone rang. For a heartbeat, my chest leapt. It was Ethan. His voice was clipped, impatient. "Mom, Olivia says you changed the locks. We can't get in. What are you trying to prove?" I closed my eyes. "It was my house, Ethan. My mortgage, my sweat, my money. I gave you everything, and in return I was humiliated in front of strangers." He groaned. "You're being dramatic. Olivia didn't mean anything by it. You're blowing this out of proportion." My throat tightened. "When she called me the maid, you laughed." Silence. Long, heavy silence. Then he muttered, "I didn't want to make a scene." My heart broke all over again. Not because of what he said, but because it confirmed what I had always known. I was never worth defending. "Good luck with the mortgage," I whispered and hung up. That night, I finally sealed the letter. But I didn't send it to Ethan. Instead, I wrote another to Michael. I didn't tell him I was his mother. I couldn't. But I introduced myself as an old family friend of Ruth's. I told him she had cared about him once and that she would have been proud of the man he had become. I mailed it quietly without a return address, my hands shaking as the envelope slipped into the blue mailbox slot. Weeks passed. Ethan didn't call again. Olivia didn't either. Their silence was almost a relief. I poured myself into small routines, tidying the apartment, reading old novels, trying new recipes in a kitchen too quiet for laughter. Then one afternoon, a letter arrived in my mailbox. The handwriting was neat, unfamiliar. My hands trembled as I tore it open. "Dear Margaret," it began. "Thank you for your kind words about Aunt Ruth. I don't remember her well, but it means a lot to know she thought of me. I've built a good life here, work. I love a family I adore. I hope wherever you are, you have people who love you just as fiercely. Warmly, Michael." Tears spilled onto the paper. He had no idea who I was, no idea what truth I carried in my chest like a live wire. And yet his words soothed something raw inside me. He had a family. He was loved. He was safe. Maybe that was enough. But fate again was not done with me. A month later, while walking through the grocery store, I turned down an aisle and froze. There he was, Michael, in the flesh. Taller than I expected, with the same deep-set eyes I saw in the mirror every morning. He was holding his daughter's hand, guiding her toward the cereal boxes, his other arm wrapped protectively around his wife's shoulders. They laughed together, a picture of everything I had once dreamed family could be. I ducked behind a display of canned soup, my heart pounding like a drum. Part of me ached to rush to him to blurt out the truth. I am your mother. I carried you. I sang to you before you were born. But another part of me knew the damage it would cause, the fractures it would bring to his perfect life. And so I stayed hidden, clutching the cart until my knuckles turned white, letting him walk past without ever knowing. That night I stared at myself in the bathroom mirror. The woman looking back at me was lined, weary, but not broken. Not anymore. For the first time I realized I didn't need Ethan's love to validate me. I didn't need to steal Michael from the life he had built. I had my truth, and that was enough. Or at least I thought it was, until Olivia showed up again. This time her eyes weren't sharp with entitlement. They were wide with fear. He's leaving me, she whispered, her mascara smudged. Ethan's packing his bags. We can't pay the bills without you. Please, you have to come back. I looked at her, this woman who had laughed at me, who had stolen my home with her words, and I felt nothing. No rage, no satisfaction, just emptiness. I don't owe you anything, I said softly. Not anymore. She crumpled in the hallway, sobbing. I stepped past her, locked the door, and for the first time in my life, I felt free enough to breathe. For weeks after Olivia's desperate visit, I carried her broken image in the back of my mind like a ghost. Part of me had once longed for that moment, for her to finally feel small, to finally understand the weight of humiliation. And yet, when it came, it didn't taste like victory. It tasted hollow. Revenge rarely feels like justice. Sometimes it only leaves you staring at the ashes of what used to matter. But life has a way of pressing forward whether you're ready or not. A few days later, I received another letter. The handwriting was the same Michael's. My hands shook as I unfolded it. Dear Margaret, thank you again for your kind words about Aunt Ruth. I hope it's not too forward, but I'd love to meet you sometime. Maybe coffee. You sound like someone who carries stories worth hearing. Warmly, Michael. I sat at my tiny kitchen table, the letter trembling between my fingers. My first instinct was to burn it, to protect him from me, from the truth that could unravel his entire life. But then I thought about Ethan, my decades of sacrifice, my endless giving, all for a son who could barely see me as more than an inconvenience. And then I thought of Michael, who was reaching out without even knowing who I really was. A son who felt a connection through nothing more than my words. I agreed to meet him. We chose a small cafe downtown, the kind with chipped mugs and the smell of cinnamon that clung to your clothes. I arrived early, palms sweating, heart racing in a way I hadn't felt since I was a girl. When he walked in, I almost didn't breathe. He looked so much like me, it hurt my cheekbones, my dark eyes, even the way his brow furrowed when he scanned the room. He smiled when he saw me, and it was like sunlight breaking through clouds. Margaret, he asked gently. I nodded, afraid my voice would crack. We talked for an hour about Ruth, about his work as an architect, about his little girl who loved drawing houses with crayons. He didn't know he was sitting across from his mother, and I didn't tell him. But every laugh, every story, every word was a gift I hadn't realized I had been starving for. When we parted, he hugged me. It was casual, polite. But when his arms wrapped around me, I felt something settle in my bones. Recognition. Blood calling to blood, even if neither of us could name it. That night, I cried harder than I ever had before, not from pain, but from the bittersweet relief of finally touching what I had lost. He was real, he was alive, and he was good. That was enough. Meanwhile, Ethan's silence had stretched into months. Rumors reached me through mutual acquaintances. He and Olivia were drowning in debt, fighting constantly, the house slipping away piece by piece. He didn't reach out, he didn't ask for help, and for once I didn't offer. Then came the call. Late one night, my phone buzzed with a number I didn't recognize. When I answered, a voice cracked on the other end. Ethan! He was crying. Mom. I'm sorry, he choked out. I lost everything. Olivia left. The bank took the house. I don't know where to go. I closed my eyes, the sound of his sobs carving me open in ways I thought I had sealed shut. For a moment, the mother in me wanted to rush in to gather him into my arms to save him like I always had. But then I remembered sitting at that dinner table being called the Maid, his laughter cutting me deeper than any knife. I remembered the years of giving until I had nothing left. "You have to learn to stand on your own," I said softly. "I can't rescue you anymore." "Please," he begged, "just one more chance." I thought of Michael, of the warmth in his smile, the kindness in his voice, of the life he had built without ever needing me, yet offering me pieces of it anyway. And I thought of Ethan, who had been given everything and treated it like nothing. "I will always care for you," I told him, my voice steady. "But caring doesn't mean carrying. You'll have to find your way now." When I hung up, I felt both lighter and heavier. A strange balance of grief and freedom. For once, I wasn't the maid. I wasn't the servant. I wasn't the invisible woman in the background of someone else's life. I was simply myself, Margaret. And in the quiet of that night, I realized something powerful. Family isn't just blood. Family is love, respect, and choice. I may have lost one son to entitlement and betrayal, but I had found another in truth and kindness, even if he never knew who I really was. The days that followed were strangely calm, like the air after a long, violent storm. Ethan's voice still echoed in my memory, raw and desperate, but I resisted the urge to call him back. For once, I let silence be the answer. I had spent a lifetime filling silence with sacrifice, with explanations, with apologies that were never mine to make. Now silence was my shield. Michael, on the other hand, kept reaching out. He invited me to dinner with his family one Friday evening, and though I told myself I would decline, I found my hand writing yes before I could stop it. I brought a pie I had baked, the old recipe my mother once taught me, and when his little girl tugged at my sleeve, asking if I would help her draw a house, I felt a warmth in my chest I hadn't known in years. We sat together at the table, Michael, his wife, his daughter, and me, and for the first time I felt seen. Not as a maid, not as a burden, but as a guest, a woman with a place at the table. I laughed. I told stories. I belonged. They didn't know who I truly was, but perhaps that was the beauty of it. Love, I realized, doesn't always require titles. Sometimes it is enough simply to be wanted. One night, after everyone else had gone to bed, Michael lingered in the kitchen with me. He poured me a cup of tea and leaned against the counter. "You remind me of someone," he said with a small smile. "Something about the way you look at people, like you see more than they want you to." I swallowed hard, my throat tight. Maybe I've just lived long enough to notice. He nodded, and for a heartbeat it felt as if he knew. Not the details, not the whole truth, but something deeper, a thread tying us together. When I left that evening, his daughter pressed a crayon drawing into my hands. A little house with 4 stick figures, 2 tall, 2 small. And in the corner, scrawled in crooked letters, the word family. I cried all the way home. Meanwhile, Ethan's life unraveled completely. The house was repossessed. Olivia was gone, and he drifted between couches of friends who grew weary of his bitterness. He called once more, but his tone was different this time, defeated, angry, full of blame. "You ruined me," he spat. "If you hadn't walked away, none of this would have happened." I listened quietly, then said the only truth I had left for him. "No, Ethan. I gave you everything. You ruined yourself." And then for the last time I hung up. In the quiet that followed, I found peace. Not the peace of resolution, because some wounds never close, but the peace of acceptance. My life was no longer chained to a house that mocked me, or to a son who never saw me. Instead, I carried Ruth's letter, Michael's smile, and the crayon drawing tucked safely into my purse. Proof that even the cruelest betrayals can birth unexpected gifts. I often sit now by my apartment window, tea steaming in my hands, watching the city lights flicker like stars. I think about the paths we choose and the ones chosen for us. I think about how blood ties can betray and how strangers can become family in the simplest of ways. And I think about the lesson carved into my bones: love must never be begged for. Respect must never be sacrificed for proximity. When someone shows you you are invisible, you have every right to walk away and find the place where you are seen. If you're listening to my story, maybe you too have been overlooked, belittled, or erased by those you gave everything to. I hope you remember this. You are not defined by their blindness. You are not the maid in your own life. You are the keeper of your worth, and it is never too late to take back your keys. If this story touched you, if it made you reflect on your own family or the strength it takes to walk away, please like this video, share it, so others might find courage too, and subscribe for more stories told from the heart. And I'd love to hear your thoughts. Leave a comment about what family truly means to you.